I think the people that I get to work with day in, day out, the culture from the top down. We're a God-fearing, God-honoring company. He has blessed us, and to work in a place like that day in, day out is truly, I think, an exception in our country. That I wish we had more places like that.
Being Mayor Pro Tem, so today's my day. I'll be in the place of Mayor Palermo. So, we'll begin with the invocation from the Reverend Gene Shelburne from the Anna Street Church of Christ.
You know, Lord, that most of our business here today is really about tomorrow. Today we lay plans to buy water. Water our great-grandchildren will drink. Today in this meeting we will consider providing water for lawns and businesses that won't be planted or established until long after most of us are gone. Thank you, Lord, for yesterday's leaders who planned wisely and who unselfishly paid the price to supply our needs today. Teach us to be just as thoughtful about tomorrow. The scriptures tell us, Lord, that you own all the cattle on 1,000 hills, so the dollar amounts that we talk about here today may not impress you. But for most of us, it is a rare day indeed when we consider spending more than $100 million. Grant our leaders wisdom equal to this task. We pray through your Son, who teaches us to look beyond today. Amen.
And on this flag day, if you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good again, and welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Amarillo City Commission, held on the third floor of City Hall each Tuesday at 3 p.m. The first item of business on today's agenda is to approve the minutes. Actually, we have, as you can see, two sets of agendas, one from the orientation meeting, which was held on June 6, 2011, and the other one from the regularly scheduled meeting last Tuesday, June 7, 2011. Commissioners, do we have any additions, corrections, deletions? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move approval of the two sets of minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved by 3-0 vote. Okay, and then we have resolutions 2, 3, and 4 on the agenda. Mr. Atkinson, for discussion purposes, I understand that we have a presentation on items, on all three items at once. Would you like me to read the headings before we go?
Please do so, Mayor. We'll jump into that.
Okay, number 2 is resolution authorizing participation in the amount of project construction costs for the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority and the approval of an amendment to the city's conjunctive use groundwater supply agreement with the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority. Number 3 reads a resolution, notice of intention and declaring expectation to reimburse expenditures with proceeds of future debt issuance. And number 4 is approval, City of Amarillo and Canadian River Municipal Water Authority interlocal agreement. You want to walk us through that?
Thank you. With your permission, we will go through a presentation, Mayor, to attempt to explain the purchase by the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority of the Mesa water rights, and then a subsequent purchase by the City of Amarillo of a portion of those water rights back from the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority. The slide that we have before you today, this is kind of the state of the known world in the Texas Panhandle as far as groundwater rights. I think we've all seen this one before. Blue are groundwater rights owned by the City of Amarillo. Green are groundwater rights owned by the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority, or CRMWA. And the red is Mesa. We'll focus in now on the next slide. This is just a blow-up of the Roberts County area here. Again, green CRMWA, blue Amarillo, red is Mesa. This is how it exists today prior to your consideration of items 2, 3, and 4. If we could flip to the next slide, this would be the result should we approve item 2. The Canadian River Municipal Water Authority would purchase from Mesa Water about 211,000 acres of water rights. As you can see, most of those are in Roberts County. That's the big block of green in the middle. Some of that is in Tree County, which is the green that is just to the north or just up from the blue. A small amount of somewhat disassociated water rights to the right, which is actually southern Lipscomb County. And then a little bit that tails off into Hemphill, Wheeler, and Gray. For the purposes of Grimlaw, they already own about 262,000 acres in Roberts County. Adding this to their ownership certainly consolidates their potential well fields and future water rights, and is a phenomenal benefit not just to Grimlaw, but of course Amarillo, because we are about 40.6% of what Grimlaw does. Grimlaw is producing from Roberts County today. They have a series of 2 big well fields over there that truly are what's saving Amarillo and the other 10 members from the failures out at Lake Merritt. Again, this will be what happens as a result of the approval of item 2. Grimlaw purchases 211,000 acres, give or take, from Mesa Water. Moving to the next slide, and item 4, now 3 and 4. The red box, or the red circle, outlines the 32,000 acres that are primarily in Tree County that the city of Amarillo is interested in acquiring, which we would then put with those blue water rights that we have just on the south side of that county line. Was asked a very good question yesterday. Well, okay, that's 32,000 acres. What does that mean? How much water is that? It's about 1.3 million acre feet of recoverable water. There's more than that there, but that's how much you can get out. And to kind of put that in a frame of what the 1.3 million acre feet do for Amarillo, we use about 56,000 acre feet a year. So that's 22 to 24 years of additional water supply just in that 32,000 acres. Okay, the next slide, please. This is what the state of the world would look like over there should you approve items 3 and 4. You see how Amarillo ties itself together on the north side of the Canadian River, and how Grimlaw has eliminated potential competition and major holes in their holding on the south side of the river. Next slide, please. What exactly is the benefit of doing this? Next bullet. It allows both Amarillo and Grimlaw to consolidate their holdings rather than to have our holdings interspersed in and amongst each other. Next. It protects us from competing with each other. Of course, we get 4 out of 10 gallons that Grimlaw produces, but we sure like to hold those individually owned water rights back and protect them, not just from Grimlaw, which is ourselves, but protect them from just about any other competition to the point that we can. Our holdings north of the river would go up to about 116,000 acres. The river provides a boundary. The aquifer generally does not flow from one side of the Canadian River to the other. It's a fault through there. The terrain, where we're looking at those water rights in Tree County, that is generally in the breaks area, or if it's not in the river breaks, it's just barely up on the top. So that in and of itself provides you some protection from future competition. The size of the holding, not only does that provide you protection, but at the point that Amarillo invests in the infrastructure to get that water, the more water that's there, the longer the value of that infrastructure will produce a benefit to the public, thus making a much better economic situation for us. I do think there's an opportunity to further consolidate a few of those holdings. Over the years, we've been contacted by owners that want to sell. However, at the time, with us potentially having the competition from Mesa Water up there, it didn't make sense to look into doing those. Reminder that Amarillo does own easement rights to allow us to take the water south of the river and a pretty good ways down across Roberts County before we would ever look at any kind of a right-of-way acquisition. Next. The water volumes in that area are very good. The 32,000 acres in question has an average saturated thickness of about 254 feet. According to the hydrology reports, we could expect in some areas to have production equivalent to the big wells that Grimwall has, and some of those wells approach 2,500 gallons a minute of production. For Grimwall, there's no need for them in the future to run relatively inefficient infrastructure that far north into Ochiltree County. Of course, Amarillo, those of us paying water rates here, we would be paying 40 cents on the dollar for them to do so, and it's just not in their long-term benefit nor ours. At the point Amarillo wants to develop those water rights, I'd like to see 100 of those gallons coming into here. Next one. Next one. The total cost to both of these purchases, item 2 and item 4, are within the original estimates that we brought back to you several months ago when Grimwall announced the possibility of a Mesa purchase. And if we'll go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about that in detail. First bullet. Again, Amarillo is about 40.6% of Grimwall. Grimwall's total purchase, inclusive of financing costs, legal costs, hydrology, everything that goes with it, is about $94.2 million. Of the $94.2 million, Amarillo's portion is about $38.3. Grimwall funds all of its projects through contract revenue bonds. That means Grimwall themselves will issue one bond or one debt. Each of the 11 members then will pay against that on their appropriate pro rata basis. For us, pro rata is $38.3. That will be repaid entirely through water and wastewater system revenues. Next set. For the direct purchase of the Ochiltree County groundwater rights, that's 32,000 acres, $500 an acre plus the associated cost. We project a maximum of $17.5 million. I would go out on a limb and say that that's going to be closer to 16 by the time we close it than that, but this is one of those that may not go over, so that's the number we're putting up to start with. This debt will be issued as a local revenue debt. We will not issue the debt until we close the deal. We expect to close sometime July or August. That's when we'll know the final cost. We will issue that revenue debt. We will pay that revenue debt back through water and wastewater system revenues. So again, the Ochiltree purchase for Amarillo is local debt. The big Canadian River Municipal Water Authority purchase will be their debt issuance. What does it mean to Amarillo and to Amarillo's customers? 11% total rate increase will fund both of those obligations. Mayor and Commission suggested we could do that not as a single 11% increase, but rather to split that into two. Propose a 6% in the 2011-2012 budget and follow that with a 5% in the 12-13 budget. When we finish, I believe Mr. Frigo may have access to what that means to a particular ratepayer. You have that sheet with you, Dean?
I can get it.
Okay. We'll get that. We can give you some exact examples for that. But again, 11% in total, 6 1 year, 5 another, and we'll be able to cover both of those. Next one. Both purchases are for groundwater rights only. This is not an infrastructure project. These are not rights that are being developed at this point. These are rights that are being acquired, being held, not only for Amarillo's future, but also for the remainder of Grimwall. Okay, next one. To kind of close, to me, the maps really are very, very telling. This is the state of the world today. The next one. That's what the world looks like should both of these transactions be approved. This takes this region to a level of certainty with its future that is not enjoyed by many, if any, places in Texas. It does include some non-competition language, does protect us one from another, and I think sets this place on a path that you're just not going to find anywhere else. So with that, I would stop and try to field any questions or comments that anyone may have.
So we're looking at the map now. The blue is 100% Amarillo, the green is Grimwall, so it's 40%.
Correct.
Any comments?
Yeah, I would just like to say that in lieu of what has happened with Lake Meredith over the past several years, even in light of 11% increase in our water rates over the next 2 years, we're still substantially below the state average in Texas and dramatically less than some of our nearby sister cities.
That is correct.
And so I want to congratulate the city staff and the Cremwell and for being able to negotiate such a lucrative arrangement that continues to honor the investment of previous commissioners and city leaders over the past 50 years to look forward to the long-term welfare of our city water system. I just really am so happy to have had the honor to be here when you managed to negotiate this kind of arrangement. So I'd like to thank city staff and specifically our city manager, Jared Atkins.
Thank you.
Ditto what Dusty.
Okay. I think it is important because I've heard the question asked, we need to conserve water and yet we're buying all this water. This is the rights only, the infrastructure is years away. Bringing it to us is right here.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, it dates back.
Mr. Frigo, could you give us the quick example of the net impact to ratepayers, please?
Thank you. For a low customer that uses like 6,000 gallons of water and 6,000 gallons of sewer, they're currently paying about $35. It's $34.49. They would increase for both rate increases $3.74. A higher user would have 20,000 gallons of water and say 10,000 gallons of sewer. They're currently paying $74.67 a month, and their bill would go up a little over $8, again, for both rate increases.
And that was a good point to illustrate that we do have progressive water rate structure. So as your total usage in a month goes up, the incremental cost of that water goes up as well. So the heavier users will be carrying a heavier portion. I would almost suggest that maybe after this upcoming round of water bills that might be one of our greatest conservation efforts, just in and of itself.
Yeah, the increasing block structure that Jared's talking about is designed to promote conservation, because if you're a large 50,000 gallon user, you're really going to pay a huge bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions from the audience? Comments? Okay. Sure. Don, could you state your name and address, please?
John Ingerson, 4706 Southwest 36th. Jared, you talked about no infrastructure on this particular, but I mean, we've already kind of done a lot of that, right? I mean, with the pipeline we have. I mean, are we pulling waters already from this blue, or getting ready to, or?
We today we're not taking any water from the blue.
None at all. Okay.
Cremwell is taking water from about the middle of that big square part of the green. They've invested about $150 million in the last 4 years to put in a project that was originally going to be a water quality project, but with the loss of Meredith has become a water quantity project. They are delivering the bulk of the water that's being provided to many of the 11 member cities today out of that area. So for the green part of the purchase, it makes that investment have a much greater lifespan, much greater certainty, and a benefit that will outlast the cost. For us, it is taking a set of water rights and providing as much as you can a protected location for those water rights. You can really only protect your water here through regulation and then through geology or geography. Put it in a place that it's not otherwise likely to be used. And this area up here, it's hard to see the shading on the image, so I apologize for that. But most of that is either in the breaks or very close to the top of the break.
I guess what I was getting, somewhere down the road, we're going to have to start thinking about getting that water.
Yes.
And, I mean, that's. I'm just. I guess, are we kind of putting those thoughts in process, or?
We are. I've got some what I think maybe are good ideas, but I really hope it's so far out in the future that nobody's going to ask me.
Because I know we've got some well rights way west of here.
We do.
I mean, there's nothing even near that. But I mean, are we talking like with Cremwell or some of those guys? I mean, it's going to be pretty expensive, I would think, to do our own deal.
It will be. It will be. That's a good question, Mr. Ingerson. Today we're building the Potter County well field, which is just north of Amarillo.
Okay.
First well field since 1957. That well field will start as a 20 million gallon a day resource. It's actually been engineered and built to go up to 40. At the point it goes up to 40, that's going to be 20, 30 plus years of water for Amarillo. At the point, as you near the end of that, you'll either look to expand it or to consider coming up in here. I don't think the notion long-term of us having our own pipe that far away is probably the best way to do it. But for example, if Grimwall were ever to need a second pipe to increase their production out there, that would be a logical time for Amarillo to work with them to try to upsize.
Okay, that's kind of what I was.
Good question, and we have had those thoughts. A lot of that's why back in 2007 we maintained the easement right to try to tie all that back and not have to do all the right way.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Commissioners, we need to consider each item individually, so I'll read the heading and the caption of item 2. Resolution, again, authorizing participation in the amount of project construction costs for the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority and the approval of an amendment to the city's conjunctive use groundwater supply agreement with the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority. This resolution approves the City of Amarillo's participation in the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority purchase of approximately 211,000 acres of additional groundwater rights in the Roberts County and surrounding area to support the conjunctive use groundwater project. Upon approval of this resolution, Amarillo will execute Amendment Number 5 for the purchase and acquisition of this groundwater supply and will be obligated for the approximately $38.3 million or 40.621% of the total, not to exceed acquisition cost of $94,275,000, inclusive of financing costs. The Canadian River Municipal Water Authority will issue bonds for the acquisition of these water rights in the total amount, with each participating member city being responsible for the repayment of their share. Amarillo will fund repayment of its share through water and wastewater system revenue. The proposed purchase is for groundwater rights only and does not include any infrastructure cost or activities. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, Mayor, I move that we approve the resolution regarding construction costs and the amendment to the city's conjunctive use groundwater supply agreement with the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority.
And a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. The motion passes by 3-0 votes. Item number 3, resolution. Notice of intention and declaring expectation to reimburse expenditures with proceeds of future debt issuance. This resolution establishes the City of Amarillo's expectation and intent to fund the reimbursement of the purchase of groundwater rights in the Ochiltree County area and related costs with the proceeds of a future debt issuance not to exceed $17.5 million. Amarillo will fund repayment of this obligation through water and wastewater system revenues. Do I have a motion?
I move resolution number 3, a notice of intention declaring expectation to reimburse expenditures, proceeds of future debt issuance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes by 3-0 vote. And then number 4, approval, City of Amarillo and Canadian River Municipal Water Authority interlocal agreement. This item approves an interlocal agreement between the City of Amarillo and the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority, CRMWA, whereby the city will purchase approximately 32,000 acres of groundwater rights from CRMWA. The identified groundwater rights are located primarily in Ochiltree County and are either contiguous to existing City of Amarillo groundwater rights in Roberts and Ochiltree counties, or are located such that they are advantageous for the future development and use by Amarillo. Purchasing these groundwater rights will benefit both the City of Amarillo and CRMWA by allowing for more effective and efficient future development and by ensuring both parties have access to viable long-term water supplies. The estimated cost of these groundwater rights is $17,500,000, inclusive of financing and related costs, and will be financed by Amarillo through the future issuance of debt to be repaid by water and wastewater system revenues. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move we approve item number 4 regarding the City of Amarillo and Canadian River Municipal Water Authority interlocal agreement.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes again by 3-0 vote. Okay, let's go on to number 5. Number 5 reads, resolution, public hearing and approval of a grant application for fiscal year 2010-2011 federal and state funding for the Amarillo City Transit System. This resolution conducts a public hearing and authorizes the City of Amarillo to submit an application to the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, for the fiscal year 2010-2011 operating and capital assistance of the Amarillo City Transit Department. The city will receive an allocation from both the Federal Transit Authority and the Texas Department of Transportation. The proposed allocation is $74,437, less than anticipated in the current fiscal year budget. American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or ARA, funds will also be provided and will be restricted to use for preventative maintenance service and items. And you have the list down there. Federal FTA funds is $2,695,000 and $695,039. The ARA funds are $543,085. TxDOT funds $411,267. Local match funds $1,327,298 for a total of $4,433,604. Mr. Atkinson, we have a presentation on this as well.
Mayor, we have with us today Ms. Judy Phelps, who runs the city transit system. We'll ask Judy to come forward. She'll be able to answer any questions or comments that you may have or that may arise as part of the public hearing. This is a public hearing, so public comment is specifically requested. Judy?
Thank you for asking me to come today. These funds are very important for the Public Transportation Department and to the citizens of Amarillo. For many citizens of Amarillo, they would not have a way to access work, education, or medical opportunities without the bus. Many people wouldn't be able to leave their block, much less their neighborhood. So these funds are very important to many citizens of Amarillo. The Federal Transit Administration funds 50% of our operating expenditures. We do get a small amount of money from TxDOT, which helps to offset the amount of money that the city must pay for operating. Our capital is funded at 80%, with the city funding the remaining 20%. Do y'all have any questions about our budget?
I have to assume that because we have an overall allocation of $74,000 less, that when we come to reviewing the budget here in the hot days of the summer, that we're going to have to talk about budgetary cuts or potentially providing additional city support for those services to maintain our current operations.
Yes, well, what we do in the budget is, so it does not affect operating, we just spend less on our capital projects. And we always, we meet our operation needs first. So we just adjust our budget numbers.
For now, we're in pretty good shape. If you'll recall, through some of the stimulus funding, we were able to have a dramatic infusion for the capital, which has put us in good shape. We don't want to get behind. We need to keep looking our part of it. But for now, we're okay.
Yes.
It shows here we're going to get $500,000 from the ARA funds. How long is that going to keep going?
Well, our ARA fund should last for the remainder of this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And the following fiscal year, just depending on costs, anywhere between 6 to 10 months. So our total ARA grant was just a little over $3.5 million. So since we've just used it for preventative maintenance, that has directly helped the city's budget because those are funds that are typically, that cost, they're operating, so it's a 50-50 match. So instead of the city having to put in 50%, it's 100% federal funds.
Any more questions? Any questions from the audience or comments?
Sorry.
Could you approach the podium, please, and state your name and address?
Al Allward, 929 Bible. I read the paper about the transit, and it said that sometimes the transit is late, sometimes they don't go at all. Now, if you're waiting for a bus and they don't go at all, that's a long way. I know I did it, and I finally hitchhiked. So, I mean, you have to have, if you're going to have a you have to have time limits. And you can't be early, because my granddaughter did that. She was down there about to go, and she was right by the school. So you can be 5 minutes late, not 1 minute early.
Mr. Atkinson, should Judy talk about the schedule now?
Please.
Can you talk about that?
Mr. Alford, do you have any more questions? Any more comments?
Not about that. Not about that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Phelps?
He is correct. There are times when our buses are running late or when they don't run. Our biggest problem right now is finding an adequate number of drivers. It's a real struggle, and when you don't have enough people to drive the buses, there are times when buses are not out on the street. Now, we also do experience delays out on routes, and it's simply because of traffic on the streets. We have many passengers who are in wheelchairs, and it takes our drivers longer to secure the person in a wheelchair or to get the person off the bus. So it does cause delays out on the street. Some of that, it just cannot be prevented, depending on, I think, the frequency of stops and who's riding the bus that day.
Are we doing something to address the shortage of drivers?
We're trying to recruit. In fact, I spent 2 mornings last week at the Workforce Commission trying to hire. The schools recently laid off about 90 drivers, and Workforce sent out cards to everyone saying, the city's hiring. And I was out there, and there wasn't a lot of interest. Our HR department helps us. We've advertised on the radio, to the Panhandle even. We've advertised in the newspaper, on our website, and it's a tough job to fill. But we're constantly trying, to fill those positions.
Okay, thank you. We have Mr. Dawson in the back, and why don't you come up first and then
Steve Dawson, 7902 Prosper. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. I wanted to ask a question about the bus stops themselves. Several of them, just have the pole. And I was driving actually today from lunch and seeing, folks out in the sun and standing up out in the sun and things. Do we have anywhere in the budget where those plans are in place to maybe just put a bench for them to sit on and maybe a trash receptacle? Because I stopped and talked to a couple of ladies at one of them, and they said they weren't allowed to take cups and things on the buses. And so when they're standing there drinking and things, and the bus comes, they just set the trash down on the ground. And so maybe if there's something we could get in place that we can have a trash receptacle there, and maybe just something for them to sit in. I would also like to see shade, but I understand we're all under budget crunches as well. In my addition to that is that if there's a way that we could get like a cost per to do something like a bench and a trash bin, at least for right now, to see what it would cost to do each individual one. I would love to have a way to do a fundraiser that I could put together, that we could get the public involved to say if they would want to sponsor a specific location or a stop, and they would get together and do a fundraiser and fund that different thing, so it wouldn't come out of our city budget if we're strict in that way. And because it just seemed 100-degree heat, I just felt so bad for those folks standing out there. And some of us are a little better off than those that were standing there. So it just seemed like something that we might, we want to look at. And I'm sure you guys have already looked at it, and there's those things that are in the budget. But if there's some way I could get that information, maybe I could. I have a lot of folks that do a lot of fundraisers and sponsoring them now with marketing and things the way they go. There's a lot of folks that might be interested in sponsoring a bus bench for a year or whatever, and then that would at least get the cost to put it in, and get some volunteer groups to do the cleaning of the trash cans and things. And to answer Ms. Judy's question on the bus drivers, I am employed with Express Employment Professionals, and we have several people on our applicants that are drivers that are looking for a place to go to work. So I'd love to be of help in any way if I could in that area as well. So if you have any of that information, I'd sure love to help in that way and see if we can get somebody to fundraise that or something. Thank you.
Adam Jenkins, 3621 South Elm Street. I was actually going to mention what this man already said. The people are standing in the heat, and it's just a terrible sight to see, and I would like to see that. But I'd like to present a solution as well. On one note, I think I've seen advertising. Maybe Ms. Phelps can touch on that subject of how we had a Phelps or some sort of advertisements of certain businesses, taxi companies, whatever. I think that would be a great solution. Also, on the community level, he said fundraising. Maybe we could utilize Eagle Scout projects. I was a Boy Scout, and I know a lot of scouts where I was looking for projects, haven't built a park bench, maybe. And while I'm on the subject, I would like to honor you, Mr. Eads, for putting the bike racks on the buses. I'm a cyclist. I park my bicycle out in front of meetings every day, and I think that should be mentioned. Thank you, Ms.
And Mr. Atkinson, is there a way for these people to get with somebody to flesh out some ideas?
Certainly, they can get with Ms. Phelps. I would comment that the bus system in terms of the bus benches is going through a major change, as you may have noticed. Prior to, I think, March 31, all of the bus benches were actually privately owned. They belonged to a concessionaire who did sell advertising, correct? That had been through 2 or 3 different ownerships of the firm. That contract expired. Those bus benches either have been removed or in the process of being removed. In fact, I think I saw them, they're all out west of Amarillo right now. But those benches are coming off. We have purchased a sufficient quantity of the newer benches, and you can see them on several of the stops, that are all being installed, all to meet the most current ADA standards, etc. So that's coming. There's, Judy, how many bus stops on your system in its entirety?
A little over 400.
Yeah, so we're working our way through that. Benches will be there. Benches will definitely be there. The system does have a small number of shelters on it today. We do have a limited amount of funding that allows us to put shelters in particular locations if it meets certain requirements. As far as putting the shelters across the entirety of the system, in many places, we flat can't do it even if the shelter was given to us. We don't have the property. We're not able to get it on to meet right-of-way standards, to comply with some of the ADA standards. It is a big deal. It's certainly a big deal when the heat's like it is. It's probably even a bigger deal, though, in the winter to some of those riders. You'll see a few of the shelters. There's one at the Albertsons at I-40 in Bell, kind of on the west side of that. There's a couple of different ones out in front of the hospitals, one on 6th Street that I can think of. There's not a lot, but in the areas that we really, have had a specific need to help riders, we've done that. It would be better to have them everywhere. It's just not something that literally we can do. So, but I sure appreciate the suggestions.
Okay, and I believe there was one more comment or question. Alan? You know who you are, but state your name and address, please.
Alan Feingold, 2601 North Granite Street. All the improvements in the system are constrained by the budget. I would suggest that you consider increasing the bus fare from 75 cents to $1. Now, I know there will be people who object to this, but I would bet that if you actually did a survey of your typical Amarillo bus rider, you'd find that at least 3/4 of them would gladly pay the extra quarter or the higher fare if they could get better bus service. That extra quarter would provide an additional $120,000 or more for the system, which could be used to hire extra drivers or to increase the salary for drivers that now are in the system, so they'll be more likely to stay, or so you will have a better chance of attracting drivers for this particular system. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Great discussion, interesting ideas. Okay. Do I have any more questions, comments? Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'd move we approve the public hearing and approval for a grant application for federal and state funding for the Amarillo City Transit System.
Sorry. And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All, any opposed? Okay, this motion passes by 3-0 vote. We need to take just a moment, if we'll all just stay here for just a moment. Dr. Eads needs to take a quick phone call. And we'll continue. And it's okay, I want to rearrange this. Mr. Ash here. When he gets back, I'd like to go out of order a little bit and move on before we get to the item 6 on the agenda and go straight to the presentation. And we'll wait for Mr. Ash. Sorry that you're not using part. We haven't done 6 yet either.
We could do 6 while they're...
We could do 6 while they're waiting. Okay. Okay, ready? We'll do item 6. It's appointments for boards and commission. An appointment is needed for the following folks. For the Quail Creek Public Improvement District, these are 3-year terms, and the folks in that area have recommended Chris Culp, but he doesn't need a reappointment, right?
Correct. We didn't need on them.
Okay, so we're looking at Ricky Culp and Jim Wiggumville, correct? Okay. And the 3-year term would begin September 1st, 2012 on Ricky Culp, and 2012, September 1st, 2012 for Jim Wiggumville. Do I have a motion?
I move that we make the following appointments to the Quail Creek Public Improvement District Plan. Ricky Culp and Jim Luganville.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? This motion passes 3-0. Oh, you're back. Okay. Well, let's move on. Sorry, I didn't do quicker notice than that. Let's go ahead and we'll come back to the consent agenda, but go ahead and, if we could, number 8 is presentation, review, and discussion, discuss the variety of available economic development tools and programs for consideration as funding sources for downtown redevelopment projects. This presentation provides an overview of the variety of available economic development tools and programs at the federal, state, and local level, which may be considered as potential funding sources for downtown redevelopment projects. Mr. Atkinson, we have the folks from Wallace Pajali here. Joe Esch is going to give the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Esch is here representing Wallace Pajali, and as noted, we also have David Wallace in the audience. And for further resource, we have Ms. Melissa Daly from downtown Amarillo. So with your permission, I'll turn it over to Joe and ask him to begin. As soon as I guess we pull up his presentation.
That's all right. Mayor, thank you. Commissioners, Mr. Atkinson, appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The project that we're working on with downtown redevelopment is, as we all know, is a very complex project. It has a number of different facets. One of those is the ability to fund the project. A public-private partnership, by definition, has both a public and private partner in it. And as part of that, we look for the different resources to which may be participated in, and may be participating in the funding of those elements. What we wanted to do is to start a dialogue to present publicly the variety of programs, a summary of the variety of programs that exist from a federal, state, and local level that could be called upon as we consider moving forward with this effort. As you'll recall from our previous discussions, a final recommendation will be coming forward to the Commission in August. For that final recommendation to come forward, a lot of things have to happen. We have to have a budget. We have to have a ability to justify that budget. We have to make sure that we're coming forward with a project that's feasible long term. Before we get to that, we want to make sure that we familiarize the people with the different, and in this body as well, with the different funding tools that could be considered in this process. So the overview today is or the presentation today is to provide you an overview of sources of funding and economic development tools that are available. I mentioned the federal, state, and local. From a federal level, the things that we're looking at are most frequently easily accessible are 3 elements: historic tax credits, new market tax credits, and EB-5. From a historic tax credit perspective, essentially the goal for historic tax credits is to help preserve historic buildings and also to stimulate the private investment to help preserve those historic structures. It helps to create jobs and helps to revitalize communities by preserving the assets that have been in the community for a significant period of time. The process for it is a 3-part process, and really it starts with at the state level with the State Historical Society. You have to go through and you have to identify the project. You have to tell them what it is that you're going to be doing in that project. They have to qualify it and say, okay, if you rehab this building in this way, Here are the things that you need to do to qualify. And then the next phase goes through and you have to make sure that you build the project to those specifications. And the third phase is you have to prove to them that you built what you said you were going to build, they said you had to build to make sure you qualify. After all those three phases, you can qualify for the tax credits. So there's numerous standards and qualifications that you have to meet to qualify for a tax credit. The benefit of that is that the tax credits are then able to be transferred. So an individual makes an investment to be able to receive the tax credits. That allows you a source of equity funds to the project, which increases the funding that's available for that project. One of the questions that has come up, and so you'll see in a lot of these slides, is a public vote required for some of these sources? No. This is a federal program which exists that to qualify for, the standards are where you have to go through at the qualification level, and if it meets it and you meet those obligations, then you qualify for the tax credit. New market tax credits are similar in that they also want to spur development. They also want to increase jobs and capital investment and induce an economic benefit in the community. It's targeted from a requirement standpoint towards certain economic thresholds to make sure that there's investments into areas that will meet certain requirements. They are processed through CDEs, these community development entities that have to go through a federal process to qualify. And there's an allocation each year in the federal budget that's allocated to applications that are filed to these CDEs. They then make determinations as to which projects to invest. Some institutions buy their own credits, some resell them on the secondary market. Essentially what you're doing is there's a value of the tax credits that come forward. You buy them, there's an amount that you get less than that tax credit. That's the benefit for people who want to buy them. And those funds then can flow through to the project. There's a window on the new market tax credits of 7 years the project has to be successful for. Otherwise, those credits then revert, and the people who have invested in those tax credits lose the credit. The benefit, again, is for qualifying projects. It is a source of funds that can be brought to the table, as long as it meets the economic thresholds and you have a CDE that has qualifying credits that can bring to the table. Again, is a public vote required? Not for this project. EB5. EB5 is a program that started in the 1990s, has gained ground in the recent 2000s. Essentially what it is the federal government issues a number of visas per year. They take a portion of those visas and they allocate it toward individuals making a capital investment in the United States. The idea is to take resources, take investments, bring them to spur the economy, to make it into areas which, again, a targeted economic area that is designated to spur investment and growth. So essentially, what they have done is they've carved out an opportunity for the visas that they're already going to look at issuing and ensure that in doing so that they're gaining revenue back to projects within the United States. There's a threshold. The capital investment that's minimum in targeted areas or in rural areas is $500,000. That $500,000 allows the individual, the applicant, to receive a visa, their spouse and unmarried children under 21. Those dollars must be at risk. The investments go through regional centers. The regional centers have to go through and qualify to be considered a regional center, and they have targeted areas in which they apply the money. Now, one of the questions comes in is it just, are you automatically putting $500,000 and you automatically get interest? The answer is no. There's two things that have to happen. You still have to go through the multi-part, 30 or so different agencies that go review you to ensure that the individuals who are applying for the visa are the types of folks that the United States would like to have enter into the United States. The second thing that has to happen is they want to make sure the source of the $500,000 investment is also verifiable, to make sure the money is not from a source that would be unacceptable. When those two things happen, then those funds can come into the program. What happens with the regional center is that they consolidate that. They have a marketing arm, if you will, that they are going looking for a series of people so they can consolidate $500,000 investments, create a pool of dollars that then can be applied to a project. The people who are making investment are seeking opportunities to have enter the United States, but they're also also seeking to return the money they've invested at a rate of return on that money in a reasonable period of time. The benefit is that return on that equity, that return on that investment, because the funds have to be at risk, whether it's structured as a loan or an equity investment, is relatively minor compared to what you would see in the typical market. So you're looking at 1 to as much as 3% interest rate versus significantly higher if you were to borrow it on the typical market. Is a public vote required for this project, or for this program? No. It's a program which already exists. The process that has to go through is ministerial. It's set forth at the federal level, and there's a significant number of steps that have to be accomplished. Presently, there are 121, 75, I think, applications for regional centers that are in process. There's about 200 regional centers across the United States. The ones that are the most successful make investments targeted on areas and make sure that the investments they are looking at, that they would qualify that project to ensure that it makes a sound business sense. That they're not just providing monies at risk on a whim, that they are evaluating the project to ensure that the opportunity to recover the funds and interest rate happens. Typically, what we have looked at is a 5 to 7 year window that those funds are outstanding. So if it's a loan, they're looking to recover that $500,000 investment, or a series of $500,000 investments, depending on the magnitude of the funds that's brought forward. It becomes more of a construction loan, if you will. So construction loans are typically 3 years in range of permanent financing. This is 5 to 7 years. We have seen in the Dallas area where there's an organization that has been very successful in planning funds out with that same time frame. They combined new market tax credits, historic tax credits, and EB-5 dollars. State program. Enterprise zone, neighborhood empowerment zone, and state rebates. Something I said? Can you go back one? I'm getting the clicker. I'm not getting the, thank you. Too fast with my finger. You're seeing a common theme. The goals of all of these programs are to create jobs, to create capital investment, to spur a local economy, hence their economic development programs. Here, similarly, you're looking at this program, the enterprise zone, is targeted towards specific areas to create capital investment, to create jobs, with an emphasis on areas that have been distressed economically or through other means, and to create that as an incentive. One of the benefits is automatically a reinvestment zone requires for a tax abatement. If a community wants to offer a tax abatement, if you don't have a program, this would allow you to project to qualify. A vote is not required. Again, it is more ministerial. It's based on the economic data around the areas to whether or not that you would want to move forward. You have to apply through the state. The governor's office receives applications quarterly for enterprise zones and then approves enterprise projects as a part of that effort. Neighborhood empowerment zone. Again, you're looking to increase capital investment in an area, job creation, benefit the economy in the qualifying areas. To qualify, essentially there's certain criteria, and again, you're looking at areas that are economically distressed, areas that have certain criterion from a census tract basis. And the benefits is that a city may choose to apply a number of different incentives in this area that include the rebate of local sales taxes, sales and use taxes, ad valorem tax rebates, and so on and so forth. The incentives may last for up to a 10-year period and are not tied in this case to employment requirements. A public vote is not required for this state program either. State rebates, and this is important as we look at this project here, because the state offers the opportunity to receive a rebate of hotel occupancy tax. If you stay in a hotel room in the state of Texas, you will have the opportunity to have a local portion of a tax and a state portion of a tax. So let's say you spend $100 at a hotel room. On top of that, there is a percentage that you pay to both the state and the local community if one has been adopted locally. Those funds are available. A refund is available of those funds, plus the state portion of the sales and use tax from a new hotel that's being constructed. So the hotel project that's under consideration potentially could qualify for a rebate of the state's portion of the hotel occupancy tax from people who stay in that hotel. So essentially what you're doing there is you have the opportunity it's the but-for test. But for these incentives, but for the gap that has to be filled, but for the use of these incentives, the project would not occur. The state recognizes that it's better to have 15% of a watermelon ultimately than 100% of a grape. So you're foregoing a stream of revenue in the short term to make sure that you have a project that spurs economic development, that spurs growth, that creates benefit for the community and ultimately for the state long term. A public vote is not required for these rebates. It is a process that you have to go through to apply and qualify for. We have been looking at this opportunity for some time and believe that the project under consideration would qualify for consideration. There are quite a variety of local programs that the communities have available to them for these types of projects. From Chapter 380, which I'll go into, sales tax for economic development, the local portion of the hotel tax, public improvement districts, tax abatements, tax increment reinvestment zones, venue taxes, and then there is the general obligation bonds and certificates of obligation. The Texas Local Government Code in Chapter 380 allows for a community to invest in economic development, to provide grants and loans to promote economic development. It's very broad. Its uses are essentially, as you define economic development, to promote the economy going forward. There's an opportunity for the community to use its dollars. The funding for that sources are varied. Whether you use general obligation bonds, whether you were to use certificates of obligation, there are a number of sources that you can use, but essentially the purpose and the program has to move forward. The community would have to adopt a policy, a program rather, that talks about what goals you're trying to achieve and how this program would be implemented on a 3D purpose. Approvals must be done in an open meeting, and expenditure must be included in the budget. If you're going to make an expenditure under the 380 and it's not included, you have to make the budget adjustment to include that anticipated expenditure. It is also that not required, it is typical practice and positive, it should be accomplished to have a formal agreement in place that says we as a community are making the investment in this project, whether it's a loan or a grant or one of the form of participation. These are the conditions under which we are making this investment. Here are the returns that we anticipate. Here are the guarantees that were provided. Here is the mechanism for recovery if indeed the anticipated benefits that we are anticipating to receive are not achieved. Sales tax for economic development. There are two portions of the sales tax code, 4A and 4B. This is one that is already very well used in this community. It's been very successful in this community. You have to look at Bell Helicopter to recognize how it's been successful in this community. Essentially, a 4A program is the adoption of a sales tax collected in a community for the purposes of economic development. One of the things it has...
we need to take a quick moment. He's a doctor.
That's all right. Something I said.
I apologize. He's an OBGYN. And we're having a baby. I apologize, Mr.
No, don't worry about it.
I understand this is a first. All the years he's been a city commissioner. First time we've been through this.
Not a problem. Look.
Special
Everything remaining on the agenda will be pushed forward 1 week. We would certainly like for Mr. Ashe and his group to be able to finish their presentation, but there will not be a comment or discussion period at this point.
And I also apologize to our audience because, yeah, there won't be any comments today at the end of the meeting. So,
however, come back tomorrow, 11:30 a.m., room 306. This presentation and more will be provided to your Amarillo Local Government Corporation, and certainly opportunities will be there as well. Joe, please.
Thank you, and congratulations to the new entrant. Yes, most definitely. New citizen executive, the potential voter. Having been there with my wife, I certainly understand. Sales tax for economic development. 4A corporations that are established, there are quite a number of them. They were established first before the 4B section came into play. They are typically an economic development, more typical economic development initiatives from manufacturing and industrial activity. State law really focuses then more on business, the typical type of business. There is allowance to expand the use of 4A corporations beyond this list through a vote where a 4A can take on 4B projects, and that may not make sense right now, but as they go through the 4B side, it may have some more relevancy. The number of allowable uses for a 4A corporation include land, building, equipment, facilities, marketing administration for economic development corporations to attract companies to locate in an area, targeted infrastructure and improvements that are for the creation and retention of primary jobs that for those types of qualified projects, training facilities, and when we had the opportunity to be here recently, we saw how both of these sections have been applied most recently with Amarillo College on a program for higher education and training for facilities. A public vote is required to create a 4A corporation. It is not required to expend the funds. There is a difference in this and the 4AB corporation, which I'll go through. The 4B corporation is, again, a local option sales tax. It is similar to the 4A in that you collect funds. It can do everything essentially a 4A can do, plus it can also do quality of life projects. It can do parks and recreation. It can do a number of other things. One of the differences is a 4A corporation has a minimum of 5 board members. It has certain restrictions on those, or no restrictions essentially on those members, whereas a 4B corporation has a set 7 board members and has a limitation on the number of board members that can be city officials or the city employees. One of the differences is before you undertake a project type as a part of the budget with a 4B corporation, you have to undertake a hearing for that. A public vote is required for the 4B. Essentially the differences between those two is that there's a difference in the authorized use of those tax proceeds. The 4A corporation has more limitations on how the funds may be expended. The 4B corporation has less. Typically what you've seen is after the adoption of the 4B statute, many of the communities that had not adopted a sales tax at that time undertook the 4B because it gave them greater latitude in the expenditure of their dollars. Oversight procedures regarding the expenditures are slightly different. You have to undertake public hearings. There's certain things that you have to do there. And the means for, which I didn't go into in great detail, for adopting or altering the taxes by election is different. To change a 4A to a 4B versus changing the uses of a 4B are different in how those go forward. This is important to this project, only this provide for informational purposes. To tell you what's out there, in Amarillo you already have a 4A corporation. There is a limit on the amount of sales tax, local option sales tax a community can have. It's 2%. As I understand it, you've already used up that 2%. So anything that you would want to do in this case would essentially require an election to allow 4A to do 4B projects. And we're not suggesting that. We're just going through the litany of programs that might be available. 4B projects, slides out of order, but essentially some other examples of some of the things that you can do with a 4B that you can't do with a 4A. You can do professional and amateur sporting facilities, athletic facilities. That's for, if you consider the MPEV is an example of a 4B type of project that could be considered under an election. Entertainment, tourist convention facilities, again, parks and recreation, affordable housing, water supply facilities, airport facilities, etc. hotel occupancy tax. I was talking earlier about the state rebate. Cities are allowed to levy a hotel occupancy tax. And then really you have the local option. There's also a venue tax that has been, which we'll get to a little earlier, or a little later rather, that has also been levied. The local option sales tax, I believe, is 7%. Here on all hotel rooms, the 60-some hotels I think that exist in this community, if you stay in one of them, you pay a local, a state portion of the hotel occupancy tax. The 2% venue tax also applies, so you have a combined state or combined rate, local rate of 9%, but the 2% has limitations, which we'll get to in a moment. There are a number of limitations to the use of hotel occupancy tax. Essentially, if you sum it up, it's to put heads in beds, activities for convention centers, facilities that promote the use of hotels in your community is the general purpose. There's 8 specific categories, but I won't go into them here because relevant to this project, what we're talking about is how that could be applied. In 2009, the City of Amarillo worked with the legislature to offer a bill that allowed the city to use off of the new hotel project that they might create to capture that 7% of that hotel's occupancy rate, that local hotel occupancy tax that you collect at the new hotel, as a source of revenue to help construct that facility. There's a limitation on that. It can only be for a 20-year period or no more than 40% of the project. There's no further limitation is that the city has to own the land that's underneath that property to be able to be qualified. What I want to differentiate here is that is not citywide hot tax, that is only on the facility that would be under construction. That differs. Working with the city this year brought forward the concept to say a number of communities have looked at the application of hot tax, citywide hot tax this time, to look at sporting facilities. Working with the city and your legislative team, we were able to introduce an amendment on House Bill 970 that was already being carried that would benefit to expand the use of a citywide hotel occupancy tax for projects such as the AMPEC. That bill has passed both the House and the Senate and has gone to the governor for signature. It passed at such a level, over 2/3 voting in support, so that upon the governor's signature it becomes effective immediately. That is a source of funds that says right now the city collects hotel occupancy tax at 7% citywide. That source of funds that you use to fund presently the CVB and also to help fund some of the civic center facility opportunities. The excess and the growth in that could be considered as a potential funding source for any community participation in the project, in that project, excuse me. Public improvement districts. Why is this important? One of the things that we've looked at in other locations is how do you ensure long-term that you are providing an environment where if there are additional amenities, be they public street amenities, or if you have safety concerns or other things that you want to focus on a specific area, how can you address those? A public improvement district is an overlay district, essentially. It's established through a 9-step process. Does not require a vote as such, but requires a petition that's over 50% of the population within that. The taxpayers in that have to be in favor of it. And then there's a series of steps that you go through. There's a variety of uses that you can apply the proceeds of a PID to, including this water, wastewater, health, sanitation, drainage improvements, street, sidewalks improvements, and so on. Also, you can deal with safety concerns with a PID. Transportation improvements, parking improvements, there's a litany of things that you see up there. The benefit to this is that it allows for a specific area that you have a project under consideration, that the businesses that have a special desire to, whether it's an improvement or a safety concern or what have you, to create a source of revenue through the community to address that issue. Tax abatement, this is one that's common across the state. Essentially what it is a property tax abatement. It does not take things off of the tax rolls. It captures the increased value, and land, by the way, is never considered. Land is not something that expires. It's not something that is available. But the increase in the value, whether it's an improvement to an existing building or a new building, those new improvements, can be abated for up to a 10-year period. School districts do not participate in this. Communities, through adoption of a policy every 2 years, are allowed to offer a tax abatement on projects. Counties can participate, other districts can participate. A public vote is not required to create this program. Tax increment reinvestment zone. This is one also that the city is familiar with. Essentially what it does is it captures, it says here's the geographic area, bounded by this, from this street to this street, that street to that street, cross streets. And in that geographic area boundary, we're going to capture and say here's the base value as it sits of January 1, the day things are created. The increases in value over a period of time for the participating entities, be it the city, the county, or other districts that may participate, they are allowed to contribute a portion of the increment up to 100% of what they receive over that project back into the TERS. The TERS has to adopt a project plan and plan of finance, which are the specific list of public projects that the TERS is going to undertake. Then the TERS can apply dollars that it collects to those projects. A public vote is not required. There are two means to create a TERS. But there's also a limitation on the community. No more than 10% of the community's land mass, as I believe, can be in a TERS. So there's a limitation on the amount of land within the community that could qualify. Its benefits are that you are allowed, you basically see public improvements, that the area that's generating the values, the increase that the project creates, captures those dollars to repay for the improvements that are needed for that project. Venue taxes. I alluded to this earlier with the hot tax. It's called the Brimer bill. And essentially what it is there's an election that's held. And there are 4 different types of revenues off of this that can be received. From a ticket tax to a parking tax to a rental car tax to also a hotel occupancy tax. If those things are voted in for a specific type of project, on parking you could get up to $3 a car from a tax if people are parking in that area. On a hotel, you heard me refer to it earlier, this is citywide on this one instance on the hotel occupancy tax. That additional 2% that is in place would be allowed to be captured citywide and then applied toward the specific project that's authorized by the voters. Similarly, the rental car tax that's captured off the rental car agencies in the community could be captured and applied toward projects. The ticket tax would be toward a specific venue. And says that 10%, up to 10% of the value of that ticket could be a tax on top of that could be collected and fed back to the project to fund development of it. A public vote is required to create a venue tax. Presently there is one that's already in place and it's for specific purposes. If you wanted to expand these uses for other projects, it would require a series of steps and other things to go through and work with the city to ensure that it makes both financial sense and, for example, a ticket tax is something you want to, if you wanted to implement that, would also require a vote. Types of projects, from arenas to coliseums, stadiums, with a variety of things, convention centers. These are all lists of approvable types of venue tax projects. Even municipal parks and recreation centers with certain limitations can be funded. Tourist development, again, the idea is that you are seeking in all of these things, in all the use of these economic development resources to spur the economic growth in an area and to ensure that the revenue that you're investing from these dollars, that you get more back than you invest in the projects long term. The last two I'll cover, and these are simple, but one of the things that's come forward is votes and the difference between certificates of obligation and general obligations. Very simply, general obligation bonds, you have to vote. They are a debt instrument that's issued by the community and essentially backed by the full faith and credit of that entity. Certificates of obligation are similar, but they don't necessarily require a vote. There is a petition provision that allows for individuals that submit a qualifying provision to require a vote on the CO, but it is not required up front. In the tools that I've provided today, what we would like to say is that public-private partnerships in any instance don't make a bad project a good project, but they can make a good project possible, hence that's why you have a public-private partnership. The only reason, and this wasn't part of the discussion, but I want to revisit this again, because it really needs to be understood. The only reason why the community should participate in a public-private partnership is that the benefits that you receive outweigh the costs of your participation. If they don't, you shouldn't participate. The level of your participation, even if it is warranted, should be justified based on the gap. The private sector invests to get a return on their money and a return of their money, ultimately. A project has a certain cost. It generates certain revenue streams. That attracts certain amounts of debt and equity investment. The difference between the amount that you can bring together from debt and equity and the project cost is the gap. If there's no gap, there's no reason for a public-private partnership because the private sector can do it on its own. If there is a gap, that's where the community can look at it to ensure that the gap meets, that the project first meets the needs of the community is something that you would like to see happen. Secondly, that gap is not in excess of the benefits that you receive. And that's how you look to create a public-private partnership. The programs we've presented are available at the state, federal, and local level. They may benefit this project. Nothing that I've presented today tells you that any one of them is going to be considered, it has to be considered. It's things that they're all being considered, and there's not a formula or a format that we have today to tell you this is the proposal. But we wanted to introduce the concepts of these different programs so that people could be aware that there's a variety of tools that exist at a variety of levels of government that are all being considered to ensure if there's any required public participation in this project, there's a variety of tools that be brought to the table. More importantly, one of the concerns is how does it affect my property taxes as a resident? I hope I've been able to demonstrate to you today that many of the sources of tools that are out there from a public funding side don't even impact your property taxes. They're all different than that. So as we look at this, let's understand that there's a variety of tools that the project could proceed in a public-private partnership where it doesn't even affect the property taxes. There are approximately 17 of those tools that I've gone through today. Some of these tools require a public vote and some of them do not. No final decision has been made, but we're planning to continue these discussions and continue to inform people not only of the project, but the tools under consideration. We're working with the city staff, with the LGC, with the folks at downtown Amarillo, with the folks at the chamber, with the folks at Center City, with the community to ensure that the project that's brought back not only makes sense from a financial standpoint, but also has the support of the community. More information will be provided as we move forward. This was where I was going to ask for questions, but I guess I won't today. I do appreciate your kind attention and again, our thoughts and prayers with the new citizen, new voter.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and appreciate the research. And again, I apologize to the crowd you have today. If you had public comment, you'll get a chance next week.